Mrs May has continued to rule out both of these options, remaining steadfast in her belief that Parliament must deliver on the results of the first referendum. A referendum which former Prime Minister David Cameron insisted back in 2016 would be a one-time vote.
As you take this decision, whether to remain or leave, do think about the hopes and dreams of your children and grandchildren. And remember, they can't undo the decision we take. If we vote out, that's it. It is irreversible. We will leave Europe for good.
Joining us now is Labour MP Anna Turley, who supports the idea of a second referendum, and a Conservative MP and Leave supporter David Davis. Hello to you both.
Hi there.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Ladies first, second referendum, likelihood?
I think it's got to happen. It's the only way through. Parliament over there is an absolute gridlock. And the truth is now what Theresa May has come back with after 2.5 years of wrangling is nothing like what people were promised back in 2016. The public are clear now. They're not happy with how things are going. They can see it's disaster and they want to have their say.
Well, I think it'd be a waste of time, because the problem is that nobody's accepted the result of the first referendum. The first referendum was a people's vote, and the people voted to leave. And unfortunately, probably a majority of MPs aren't listening to that and don't want to know. So they've even rejected the very generous compromise that Theresa May's come forward with, which would virtually keep us in the customs union for at least 2 more years. So the problem isn't with the people. We know what the people voted for. The problem is that the MPs aren't willing to follow that up.
I'm afraid that's just not true. People like me voted to trigger Article 50 because we said, fine, we're here, the referendum, get on with it. But what we've seen is 2.5 years of shambolic arguing amongst the Tory party. I mean, how can it be right that you go out and negotiate with 27 other countries before you've even sorted out your own parliament, you've got agreement back home? It's a ridiculous strategy. She's been extremely undemocratic. And what the public are being presented with now is nothing like what they were shown before. And we know the damage it's going to do in areas like mine that have high manufacturing record, where we lost 3,000 jobs to the steelworks. Our industry manufacturing has been on decline for 30 years, and this is going to be a further hammer blow to areas like ours that we hit the hardest.
Even if that were true, I mean, it wouldn't. The reason why Parliament has been divided is because the Labour Party have said that they'll vote down any agreement whatsoever because they want to have a general election. So that's the first thing. But if we have another referendum, it's not going to change the numbers in Parliament. We'll still have the same members of Parliament who want to vote it down either because they think that Theresa May is too soft, or because they want a harder Brexit, or because they want a general election. It's not going to change the numbers in Parliament.
But that's the point. Parliament is in gridlock, and that's why only the people can resolve this. We're not going to get any kind of deal, whether it's a Norway, whether it's a hard Brexit. There is no deal that's going to get through Parliament, so it's got to go back to the people.
I mean, the problem is that the people have already resolved it. It's the MPs. And you just said yourself, we've had 2 years of arguing in Parliament. We'll have another 2 years of arguing in Parliament. The problem is that the MPs aren't willing to do what the public have said. And let's be honest, a referendum won't solve anything, because if people vote to leave, then the Remainers will never accept it. They'll say they want more time to discuss it, and that they'll ask the High Courts to change it, or whatever. If the other side wins, if the EU side wins, then basically leavers would never accept it. They say if people have changed their minds before, they'll change it again. We can have 3 referendums instead of 2. Every general election will have a call for another referendum.
That's just
the result
not the case.
will never ever be accepted.
The reality is now we're actually going to be voting on something that is real, that is tangible. What we voted on in 2016 was nebulous. Everyone projected their anger, their frustration, their hopes, their aspirations on it, and that was never actually articulated what it was. Now we know what Brexit is. It's Theresa May's deal. Like it or lump it, there is no other deal available. It's Theresa May's deal, and the public should vote as to whether they support it or not.
There is another deal. If people don't support the deal, we passed legislation, you probably passed it as well, which would mean we get a hard Brexit on the 29th of March.
Which would be a disaster.
No, I don't think it would be. I think it would be a perfectly acceptable outcome. I would go with a compromise. I mean, I would prefer a hard Brexit, actually, but I would accept a compromise, because I think that's reflective of the concerns that people have got. But if those who want to stay in the EU aren't willing to recognise that they lost the referendum and that they have to compromise, then I think we might as well go for a hard Brexit.
This hard Brexit is beyond reckless. No serious politician should recommend this. Your government's own statistics. Your government's own statistics.
What does hard Brexit mean to you?
Sorry?
What does hard Brexit mean to you?
Well, hard Brexit means out of the customs union, out of the single market, free to do our own trade deals, and we hang on to the £39 billion we promised the EU.
His government's own statistics show the North East would be hit in the region 16%. I didn't vote for hard Brexit.
Well, you voted for Article 50.
Yes, because I expected a decent negotiation, which you failed to do. Your hard Brexit would leave my constituents 16% worse off in the North East economy.
The Treasury,
did you come in to cost people their jobs and livelihoods? Your own government's Treasury figures.
If we voted for
Brexit.
These are your government-owned statistics. The North East, yet again, will be hit the hardest. We've already... The inequality in this country is what drove people's vote. The unemployment and the rich are getting richer. This is 8 years of austerity. These are the driving reasons why people felt that Parliament and Westminster was not standing up for them. I spoke to them on my doorstep. I represent a 67% Leave seat, so I speak to them every single day, and I listen to them very, very carefully. And it's our chemical industry, it is Nissan, it's Hitachi, it's the industries in my seat where they will leave, they will go abroad, and they will take their jobs, and I'm not prepared to make my constituents worse off. And I know that's why you let him reply to us.
Exactly what the Treasury said would happen if we voted to leave. Not if we left, but if we voted to leave. They published all these reports, the Treasury saying that if we voted to leave, there'd be a loss of confidence in this country, jobs would be lost, people would be falling out. I mean, what actually Remainers are saying at the moment is that if we have a hard Brexit, there won't be enough people to fill all the jobs.
It's not Remainers. I've sat in select committees and heard the automotive industry, the aerospace industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the chemical industry tell me they will leave this country and they will take jobs and livelihoods with them.
All the same people that said that we should join the Euro 15 years ago. CBI, Institute Directors, they were all saying, let's join the Euro 15 years ago. That was a disaster.
I'm glad to know you know more about the automotive industry than
this. The Euro was a disaster, wasn't it?
So is it
I did actually work in it for years.
So is a potential compromise an indicative vote?
Sorry?
Is a potential compromise indicative votes?
I mean, I would accept the compromise. I think, I think Labour MPs who support staying in actually ought to accept the compromise. If we don't have the compromise, then we're going to have to move for a hard Brexit. Of course we will, because people have voted to leave. We could take the compromise. I will go for it, even though I don't like it very much. But I think if people aren't willing to accept it, then we've got to leave another way, of course.
And it's still a total fudge. People out there didn't vote for this, and a compromise will just damage the country without giving them what they voted for. So we go back and put it back to them and say, is this what you want? Or in the light of all the evidence that's come through in the last 2 years, are you sure this is what you want to do? And we will listen to them.
So if you're confident, potentially, that Leavers would win the vote again, why not have the vote?
Well, why should we? It's a betrayal of all those people who voted to leave in the first place. We can't just keep holding referendums until the public get the result that the politicians want. And as I said, it won't make a blind bit of difference, because the problem isn't with what the people have said. The problem is with the politicians doing what the people have said.
And the problem is, this kind of attitude is the one that's actually patronising the British public. They've sat here for 2 years and seen the absolute shambles that's happening here. They're deeply nervous and deeply worried about what's happened. This isn't what they were promised in 2016. So I think it's patronising and not listening to them, to ignore them and try and shove through Theresa May's deal, or to drive the country off a cliff.
Leave voters have not changed their minds.
There's a huge swing in my constituency.
Leave voters are not changing their minds. They're getting more and more angry about it. They're more and more angry about it. Why should they be forced to vote again just because you didn't like what they said last time?
It's not about that. You're the one who's refusing to give them that. You're trying to bundle through Parliament.
So would you have another vote, another referendum in 3 years' time?
No, this will be the final.
The final one.
Because it's a reality. No, it's a reality.
Change their minds
I don't want another deal on fantasy.
So people change their minds in 3 years' time.
I don't want you to continue to lie to my constituents, to tell them.
I haven't been lying. You were the ones. Not you.
£350 million on a bus.
And that's exactly what we pay, isn't it?
This is not.
That is what we pay, though, isn't it?
You're not going to put it back into the
isn't
NHS, are you? You want to create
put it into
a
the
low
NHS,
tax
couldn't we?
haven. You're not going to, and that's a good.
But we could
what
put
are we
it
going to
into
do when the
the NHS, but
economy
we do pay them
tanks? With a hard
350
Brexit, the economy is going to tank. We're not going to be wealthier.
We do pay them 350 million a week.
There'll be no money going into public services.
We do pay them 350 million a week.
There'll be no money going into public services. There'll be no money going into our economy.
How much do we pay the EU every week?
It's not.
How much do we pay them every week?
What do we get?
How much do we pay them every week? You said it was a lie. How much do we pay them?
You're not putting £350 million a week. If you're prepared to drive an EU bus, let's see it again.
How much do we pay them? £350 million a week would be spent on the National Health Service.
You just said that was a lie. How much do we pay them?
It is a lie. I'm not going to go into the secret, because I know that we get more in the North East.
We actually pay them £350 million gross a week.
And you're going to put that into the NHS. You continue to cut.
We could put that into the NHS.
Will we give that money to the National Health Service?
I'd love to see it go to the NHS. We could give it to the NHS. We could spend it on education. We could spend it on defence, on transport, or any other things. But we do pay them £350 million gross every week, so it's not a lie to say that. And anyone who says it is a lie, tell me, how much do we do pay them?
Public services are going to be run off the cliff because people are going to leave.
How much is it?
I don't know, and I'm not really interested.
How much we pay the EU every week?
I'm not interested in the overall figure. I'm interested in my constituents' livelihoods. That's because you're obsessed with this. I'm interested in my constituents' lives, their jobs and their livelihoods.
Surely if you're going to accuse...
I know it's £350 million the NHS is a lie. We know you're not going to put that in.
How much do we pay them every week?
Stop trying to...
I'm not
I'm asking you. We've established how much we pay them gross every week. What do we want to hear?
It is £350 million a week.
gross.
But you,
What do we want to hear from the Prime Minister today?
You're continuing to perpetuate this nonsense, and this is why you fought and you exploited people's fears and insecurities and the inequality in this country and the austerity that your government. You've been driving public services into the ground for 8 years. Exactly. You're using people's anger to drive your own agenda.
Because it's totally undemocratic. We're having laws made for us by people in Brussels who we don't elect. There's not one person in 100 who knows who's even in charge of the European Union. Which party is running the Parliament? Which party is running the European Parliament?
People that we
Which
vote
party
in
is
to
running the
select
European
them.
Parliament?
I'm interested in.
You're an MP, you don't even know
I'm
that.
representing.
You don't even know.
This is the problem.
Look,
So why are you exploiting?
Most people know that Theresa May is the Prime Minister and that we have a Conservative government at the moment. They may or may not agree with that, but most people know it. Nobody knows who's running the European Union. I ask your viewers out there, how many people know who is running the European Union? Who's in charge of the Commission? Who's in charge of the Parliament? Which political party is running it? The answer is not 1 in 100.
Exploiting. The problem is we have democratic representation. The fact that we don't engage with that enough as a country is our fault, because people like you have run the EU into the ground and used it to blame for everything. You've used it to blame for everything that's going wrong in this country.
You're making your point. Go on, Hannah.
Yeah, you use the EU as an excuse. I mean, it still works in my constituency. 3,000 jobs lost overnight, and people blame the EU for the government not intervening. That's not true. The government could have intervened. 3 months later, they intervened to save Portugal. Your ERG group have been running the EU into the ground for years and years, blaming it for everything from immigration to everything that's wrong in this country. When actually what people were angry about in 2016 is 8 years of austerity, 8 years of underfunding into our NHS and our public services, rising unemployment, high unemployment in areas like mine, and you exploited that for your lifelong irritation and obsession, which is with the European Union.
Irritation or obsession. I believe that Britain would be better off outside the European Union. I'd find it bizarre that you're saying that we'll lose jobs if we leave the European Union. But at the same time, hang on, let me just finish. At the same time, you're also saying that there won't be enough people to fill all the jobs available if we leave the European Union and we don't have a visa scheme. So, you know, there are massive contradictions in the arguments that you're actually putting forward. People have been complaining that house prices will fall 1 minute and that nobody will be able to afford the house the next. People have been saying, oh, the country will be flooded with cheap food, and then the next minute saying that there isn't going to be enough food in the country. So you can't even get your own scare stories to line up.
These are your government's own statistics. This is your government's own impact assessment. This is everything your government's own words. Your own Chancellor said this deal is going to make people worse off. So how can you stand here and defend a policy that you know is going to make the British people poorer and is going to make us weaker in the world?
The same government figures that came out after the referendum, which said yes, which were wrong, weren't they, when they came out after the referendum?
These were out in March.
These were the government's... No, the Treasury figures as to what would happen if we voted. No, but they're now, but they weren't about that, were they? They're about what would happen if we voted to leave.
We haven't left yet.
Yes, but they weren't about that, so you're ignoring it.
So why do the chemical industry tell me they're going to leave?
Why do you understand there's a difference?
Why does the aerospace industry tell me they're going to leave? Why does the automotive industry tell us they're going to leave with a hard Brexit? Don't patronise me. Why are they saying this? Because they know they can get... Because they're telling me. Experts
and then as soon as I question you on them...
No, I know you've had enough of experts.
You rush forward.
You've had enough of experts.
Let's go back to a point you made.
These are the business experts.
Let's go back to a point you made, okay? The Treasury published figures as to what would happen.
Your government published figures,
yes. My government's Treasury published figures as to what would happen if we voted to leave. Not if we left, but if we voted to leave. And those figures were wrong, weren't they?
Well, I haven't seen those figures. Listen,
you haven't seen the figures.
No, I'll tell you what figures I have seen. I'll tell you what figures I have seen. Your government says my economy, my regional economy, is going to be disadvantaged.
You're rushing off again.
No, you're interrupting me.
16%.
16% impact on the economy of the North East, which is already hard. I have a youth unemployment rate that is 2.5 times the national average. Are you telling me that a hard Brexit is going to get my young people into work? It is not. It's going to lose our chemical industry. It's going to lose our automotive industry. It's going to lose our aerospace industry. And my constituents who work hard in manufacturing didn't vote for this. They didn't vote to be worse off. They didn't vote to lose their jobs. They didn't vote to be poor.
So you didn't see the Treasury
more
figures?
Inequality between the North East and London.
You didn't look at the figures that came out of the Treasury?
Those are figures that came out of the Treasury.
Hang on,
these are your government's figures that came out of the Treasury that said 16%.
You're not giving me much of a chance here.
No, because you're trying to talk about other figures.
I'm telling you about these figures. I'll check my phone while you have a little chat.
Great.
Okay, you carry on.
It's an amazing way to debate.
No, carry on. Oh, sorry, if I can get in. I'm not being patronising, but I can't get a word in edgeways here.
Please don't speak to her in that fashion. That's not acceptable. You've had more than you've had more.
Okay,
you've had 50%
you carry on. You carry on.
Thanks for joining us, David. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Very
for
nice.
amazing. walking in front of the camera. Excellent. Sorry, Anna. So you were talking to me about he has some serious points to make.
Absolutely, and I understand this is a lifelong obsession. People have been driving these figures, but for me, I live in the real world, which is the world of my constituents. We lost 3,000 jobs overnight with our steelworks because of a decision by the government. We have only barely holding on to our chemical industry, and I had meetings all last week with companies who are having to go back to Singapore and beg their bosses for more time because they didn't know what's happening with Brexit. Otherwise, they're going to leave. We've had Nissan. We've had all.
But David Davis is right when he says that the gross payment that we give to the European Union every week is £350 million, and that could be used on services here in the United Kingdom.
But we get a huge amount back from the EU, particularly areas like the North East. We gain gross by what we get back from the EU compared to what we put in areas like mine. They're actually redistributing. And the reason why people voted to leave in areas like mine that have been left behind is because they're fed up of feeling like they're always at the bottom of the list.
But
they never get the jobs.
Voted to leave.
Absolutely, but they're changing their minds. And when I talk to them, this isn't what they voted for. They voted because they're angry and they're fed up and they're disaffected and they wanted people to listen to them. But they are realising now that what they're being promised is nothing like what they had they were given in 2016. They're nervous about their jobs.
They're
nervous about their.
Say,
but it is. I've seen a 9% swing in my constituencies. Some will still vote the same, but many are changing their minds. And I think if we're Democrats, let's go back to the public. Let's ask them again, because it's not for me to predict what they're saying. It's not for David Davis to predict. It's not for people in there to interpret the referendum how they want, because in speaking to people, there were so many reasons why people voted. There are so many different interpretations of what Brexit could be, from a Norway to a Canada to Theresa May's deal. Everyone's got their own interpretation. There is only one Brexit, that is her deal. We've got to put it back to the public to see if it's really what they want, if they're willing to take this risk, or they're happy to stay in and reform the European Union from within.
Sadly, we're out of time. We must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.